The Aphid Has The Juice. The following contains valuable information not seen on television nor available in college for even the largest of student loans. It addresses the wondrous existence of fiat paper money, counterfeited out of thin air and loaned into existence at interest payable to the Federal Reserve System. The Fed is a private for-profit banking cartel owned by some of the world's largest dynastic families, who learned from their experience in emerging from the Dark Ages that conquest through financial erosion is to be preferred over war. Since war ruins infrastructure while financial erosion just ruins the people and leaves the valuable infrastructure standing. The following is in question and answer format where a student of mine asks the questions and I provide the answers. Grab your wallet and enjoy. Why is there paper money? Answer: under a hard money system, a king had to stop worrying until he ran out of gold. Game over, and the king got rooked. Under a debt-based paper money system, war can continue forever, or at least until all the trees are gone. So kings of old only killed each other to get the other king's stuff? And to impress their girlfriends, but most wars have been fought over natural resources. Once it was just gold, today it's oil, tomorrow it will be water. Beyond that, it could be air. Monarchs can be brutal. Aren't today's governments kinder and gentler? Actually, no. Hundreds of millions of people died at the hands of their own governments during the 1900s alone, but not until after disarming them first. I see, but aren't democracies better than monarchies? That would depend on the monarch. There never was a person born who would not become corrupted by enough power. Aside from myself, of course. Plato suggested that the world should be ruled by an all-wise philosopher king. Perhaps he had himself in mind. But where do the rulers come from? Can the common man get to rule? Oh no, that would be a little too democratic. Candidates are selected and groomed in advance, then funded to run for office so they can pass legislation that will benefit their sponsors. Congress should wear contributor patches on their suits, like NASCAR race drivers. My history teacher told me that democracies are good. Did your history teacher attend public school? All democracies fail when the majority realizes they can game the treasury at the expense of the minority. From there, it's just a short ride to totalitarianism and ruin. America is in the 9th inning now with bases loaded. Gee, and here I thought democracies were good. Spend 10,000 hours in public school and another 10,000 watching TV and you can believe pretty much anything. So what is a democracy exactly? A democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for breakfast, where the people's votes are bought with promises of benefits. The people vote for the politician who will steal the least from them. It never occurs to them to vote for none of the above. Don't most politicians mean well? Maybe, but so did Genghis Khan. If the people are moral, the government will be moral. The problem is that young people raised on Grand Theft Auto might grow up to be politicians one day. Do the people really support these candidates? Oh, sure, but that's only because they don't see that they have other choices. Douglas Adams said it best in an excerpt from his book, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. Let's listen in as two characters, Arthur and Ford, discuss this very thing. The people hate the lizards, and the lizards rule the people. Odd, said Arthur. I thought you said it was a democracy. I did, said Ford. It is. So, said Arthur, hoping he wasn't sounding ridiculously obtuse, why don't people get rid of the lizards? It honestly doesn't occur to them, said Ford. They've all got the vote, so they all pretty much assume that the government they voted in more or less approximates the government they want. You mean they actually vote for the lizards? Oh, yes, said Ford with a shrug, of course. But, said Arthur, going for the big one again, why? Because if they didn't vote for a lizard, said Ford, the wrong lizard might get in. Okay, back to our question and answer. That's pretty good. So who selects the lizards? I mean, the candidates who get to run. The private foundations and think tanks. And who chairs them? The bankers. Where do the millions in campaign donations come from? Largely from corporate donors like bankers. And who chairs the corporations? The bankers. So where does the government get its army so it can kill other armies? Well, from the people. And why do the people serve in the army? Well, for many, because they need a job. The army will pay them to kill other humans or just break their stuff. Do this well and you get a medal. Do it long enough and you get a pension. But how do the people know which countries to attack? The media tells them. And who controls the media? Well, the bankers. How does the government pay its army? With paper money. And who provides the paper money? The bankers. But where does paper money come from? Oh, that's simple. Rag linen from the flax plant is fed into one end of a printing press, and Federal Reserve Note legal tender coupons emerge out the other, each bearing the trophy likeness of a deceased notable. Why trophy likenesses? Because many of the notables depicted on Federal Reserve Notes fought the bankers during their lives. Jackson called them a den of vipers. Lincoln referred to them as his greater enemy. Is a Federal Reserve Note a dollar? No, a dollar is a unit of measurement, like an inch or a quart. A dollar was defined in the 1792 Coinage Act as 371.25 grains of silver. A Federal Reserve Note is roughly 1 gram of paper. So who gets to print and spend this fresh paper money without being prosecuted for counterfeiting? Governments, of course. It makes them vastly richer for a while. So does the government just print up all the paper money the economy needs and distribute it to the people for their use? Certainly not, for then the people would labor no more than necessary. They would work mornings for themselves, then take the rest of the day off. Today they labor all morning so they can pay 50% of their wages in the form of taxes, fees, fines, penalties, and interest. To whom are these taxes and fees paid? Why, to the government, of course. But isn't the government we the people? No, only certain people. Why must everyone's taxes be so high? Because the government is huge and its workers must be paid. Besides, the government pays billions in interest to the bankers for the use of their credit money, and someone has to pay all that interest. Can't the government spend its own money to pay that interest? Governments inherently have no money of their own. They get it by taxing or printing. The modern way is to do both. Why don't governments just print and distribute interest-free money? Because then there would be no inflation and the people would relax and work less. Less work would mean lower taxes. Lower taxes would mean smaller government. A smaller government would collect even less in taxes and would therefore have even less money with which to pay the interest to bankers to create more money for them. It's a downward spiral that could lead to a very small government and a great deal of personal liberty for the people, which of course cannot be tolerated. So the government delegates the credit money creation process to private bankers instead? You've been paying attention. Is all of our money paper money? It's not our money, it's their money. They just let us rent it from them. But again, is it all in the form of paper? No, paper money is but the small part of the currency iceberg that is visible. Most modern money is electronic and remains beneath the surface. It is born in a computer, travels between computers, and dies in a computer. A modest portion emerges as paper from time to time and ends up in your wallet. But why do ever-increasing quantities of credit money need to be created in the first place? Isn't there enough to go around already? No, there is never enough for tax and spend politicians. So how does new credit money come into existence? When a banker issues someone a loan. Is this true of all money or just some of it? Oh, all money. If every loan outstanding were paid back, our entire money supply would cease to exist. We are absolutely without a permanent form of money. So there is no new paper money created until the act of borrowing creates it, yet the additional money needed to pay the interest on this newly created money does not exist at the moment it is created. Is that right? Bingo. That additional money only comes into existence when even more new money is borrowed into existence. Wow! So the ever-expanding creation of credit money must be the largest Ponzi scheme in the history of the world. Yep. By virtue of its pervasive nature, and credit money is the ultimate something-for-nothing scheme, violating in every way the Tantsville principle. What does that stand for? There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. But doesn't nature abhor a vacuum? Yes, but bankers love one. Fresh credit money rushes into the economic vacuum created by fractional reserve banking, and the government sucks it all up. It's history's greatest Ponzi scheme. Crooks like Bernie Madoff are mere pikers by comparison, but then they don't get to run the government. Fractional reserve banking sounds like it could expand forever. Only until it crashes. All paper monies throughout history have failed. This one will too. But isn't our money system too big to fail? Ask Rome. So why do the people borrow so much money? So they can have more stuff. Do the people really need all of this stuff? No, but the media tells them they do. Social approval requires that people have the same stuff as their neighbors. When new stuff comes out, they sell their old stuff on eBay or give it away on Craigslist. You can get some great stuff that way. And who controls the media? Why, the bankers do. Woo, the bankers really have things wrapped up. So who are the bankers? Representatives of dynastic families who chair the boards of directors who oversee the corporations that run the banks that own the shares of the world's central reserve banks. The ankle bone is connected to the knee bone, is connected to the thigh bone. Where does the money come from for governments to make their interest payments to bankers for the use of their paper money? From the public in the form of taxes exacted under threat of force, penalty, and incarceration. This is so everyone can be free. Why do the people pay these taxes? So the government will protect them. There is a species of ant that herds an insect called the aphid, much as mankind herds sheep. The ant strokes the aphid with its antenna, and the aphid produces a drop of liquid that the ant uses as sustenance. In exchange for the aphid's generosity, the ant patrols the neighborhood and protects the aphid from its only known predator, the ant. It's a protection racket like organized crime and confiscatory taxation. So taxes are a protection racket? No, taxes are a collection racket. Ancient Egyptian pharaohs sent out tax collectors to bludgeon farmers who failed to pay over a portion of their crops. Today, the IRS just asks the bank to send them your bank balance, and the bank does it for them. Getting back to money, didn't a top Fed official once admit that taxes are collected by governments to protect the buying power of their credit money? Yes, former chairman of the New York branch of the Federal Reserve System, Beardsley Rummel, explained this in a 1942 essay titled "Taxes for Revenue Are Obsolete." He explained that since the government can print all the paper money it needs to pay its bills and meet its obligations, it has no need to collect taxes from anyone. But printing too much paper money would cause excessive inflation, even hyperinflation. So the government forcibly collects taxes so that when the people pay their taxes to the IRS, it leaves less spending power in their hands, therefore removing much of the excess credit created from the money supply, thereby controlling and protecting the spending power of paper money. Do you mean that bankers can deliberately create more credit money than is actually needed, then mask the fact by getting the government to siphon some back off the top of the money supply through taxes that wouldn't need to be collected in the first place if the government just printed and distributed its own money interest-free? Go to the head of the class. Wow, that's quite a feedback mechanism. Yes, it works just like the rubber ball in the back of the toilet tank. When the water gets too high, the valve shuts off. The water is the money supply, the height of the rubber ball is the tax rate, and the IRS is the flush handle. Jeepers, why do people put up with all this? Mostly because they don't know what's going on. Besides, they're happier that way. Why doesn't the government run public service announcements on TV to explain it all? But no one would watch them. Without wardrobe malfunctions, people eating bugs, and similar forms of entertainment, the people simply aren't interested. So why don't the preachers, priests, and rabbis explain it from the pulpit? Well, because they don't work for real churches as described in the Bible and other religious scripture. They work for incorporated churches, basically corporations with steeples that apply to the IRS for tax exemptions. The IRS perches on their shoulder like a little bird so it can keep a close watch on everything they say from the pulpit. If they cross the line, they lose the tax exemption, and that's not good for church business. After all, people don't want to pass the plate if they can't write it off on their tax returns. Aren't there any public school teachers who are aware of these things? Why don't they teach the children? Because the teachers' union won't allow them. If they did, the state schools wouldn't give them their fair share of free cheese subsidies from the federal government. Wow, they've pretty much got this whole thing locked down, don't they? Pretty much. But don't the people want to be free? A pet will love whoever keeps its food bowl full. A taxpayer will love whoever keeps the free cheese coming. Is it possible to be free and still receive government benefits? Well, there is a difference between freedom and liberty. A dog on a leash clipped to a wire strung between two trees is free to wander back and forth, but it's not at liberty. Likewise, a taxpayer is free to vote for their choice of Democrat or Republican, both opposite sides of the same playing card and controlled from a level above that of elected politics. Didn't President Dwight Eisenhower call that the military-industrial complex? Yes, various writers have called it the hidden hand, the Committee of 300, the Illuminati, etc. Of course, this unseen element does not really exist. If it did, you could see it. Since you can't see it, it must not be there. Anyway, it's all just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. Sounds to me like the public is pretty well conditioned to believe whatever the government and the media tell them. How long has this system of mass mind control worked this way? Oh, for thousands of years. The church ran it for a long time. Today it's TV. Who knows, maybe tomorrow it will be on a chip. Is government even necessary? Can't the people just govern themselves without a government? That's an ongoing debate. America was a wonderful experiment in liberty that grew out of the Age of Enlightenment. But the age of Google, Twitter, and Angry Birds may mean that it's time for a new experiment. The problem stems from a total misunderstanding of what government is in the first place. All governments throughout history have been little more than bands of rogues and thieves in temporary possession of territory which they control by plundering the people of their wealth, and in ways that not 1 in 1,000 citizens can even recognize. And America is no exception? I'm afraid not. By acting through their various frontmen in the colonies, like Alexander Hamilton, whom the public had come to love and admire, elements of an ancient European banking tribe had a hand in writing the U.S. Constitution in order to guarantee that the new federal government would pay off the debts of the colonial government. Basically, the new nation was bought and paid for from day one. By the way, this is why the entire city of Washington, D.C. was designed by a Mason, and why its central avenues are laid out in a pentagram to form the usual goat's head. Masons are big on symbolism. This same hidden hand fomented the War of 1812, the war between the states, World Wars I and II, and they've had a hand in the perpetuation of war, with occasional interruptions of peace, ever since. So the idea of the people governing themselves is pretty much hopeless. Theoretically, the people could govern themselves someday in the future, maybe when they're ready for it. But until then, who would they pay taxes to? Thousands of years of obedience training have convinced people the world over to pay taxes to their elected supervisors. Without being able to send their money into the government each payday, how would they get it back again in the way of benefits? You're right, it does seem puzzling. So what can the people do about all this? After all, the ant is much larger than the aphid. Yes, but the aphid has the juice.